By the time I was old enough to remember it, St. Louis had become a large city. Manufacturing and shipping had crowded the water of the Mississippi River, and the citizens were clustered into groups of common ancestry. The German immigrants kept their traditions and memories alive in each other. My father was a buoyant man, happy in spite of himself and his circumstances. He married for love, or I assume that he did, as he always said it was the only reason for it. My mother was probably beautiful when they married, before hard work and children began slowly turning her to stone. She lost her first 2 children shortly after childbirth and another barely formed fetus before she gave birth to my brother James. He rewarded all that pain and heartache by becoming the perfect child for her. Solemn and stern, even as a baby, James could be relied upon for things that my father could not be. I came along barely a year later and was too young to remember the stillborn twins. But I do remember Frankie. He appeared wrinkled and wailing when I was 6, and the baby, Willie, made a similar entrance a week before I turned 10. I had a friend, Kathryn, and she did really well at school. My parents didn't think to send me, and I didn't much care. Sometimes I would meet Kathryn after school and walk home with her. There, I would see her older brother, Jacob. Everything Jacob did was exceedingly interesting to me. Even the most trivial action, like chewing or spitting or swinging his legs, held my attention like nothing else. It was from Jacob that I learned my family was going to California. James had apparently announced it at school. He seemed upset, more so than I. I suppose I didn't fully understand at the time. My father was buckling under the soul-killing work at the iron foundry. It was 1849, and several of the men from the foundry would sit at our table in the evenings and talk about going to California, about gold, about freedom. My mother would stand in her bedroom, listening through the doorway, her back stiff, Bible clutched in one hand. She seemed so disturbed I thought to comfort her once, but her back straightened even more severely at the sound of my approach, so I retreated. It took almost a year to get ready to go. My father was joyously selling off the trappings of his current life and purchasing things he would need on his new adventure. If he was aware that his wife was despairing, he didn't show it. He would be free, and the promise of it caused him to dance and break into song and toss and tickle his children with glee. And though I basked in the happy attentions of my father, there was a small alarm starting quietly in the back of my mind. If I spent too much time with my mother, the alarm would sound louder, so I would escape to see Kathryn, though Jacob was truly the one I would seek out. He kissed me that winter behind the Christmas tree, and I told him I would marry him if he wanted me to. And then one day, it became real for me. I found my mother staring sullenly at her good china that would not make the journey. She seemed so forlorn it was in my mind to comfort her, until I watched in horror as she broke every piece rather than bear the thought of someone else having it. She scraped what solace she could from the pages of the Bible, and when that proved insufficient, she packed the remaining fear and disappointment into her heart, where it hardened like coal in the ground. What cruel fortune to have been born into a family who, for one reason or another, had no need of comfort, when I felt overflowing with a store of it. It made me silent, and maybe even stern, like her. I couldn't muster a smile at the going-away party Kathryn gave for me. All I could think was that Jacob would be kissing one of these other girls behind a Christmas tree. He would forget me, but I would not forget him. I vowed to come back one way or another, hopefully before it was too late. I didn't know the other families we were traveling with? 2 of them had no children at all, and the others had little ones like Frankie and Willie. James was big enough to pull his full weight with the men, so even though there were 19 of us, I was basically alone, which suited me fine. I had nothing to say. I walked along, drowning in a sea of longing. With every step that took me further away from home, my mind chanted with the rhythm of the movement, I want to go back, I want to go back, I want to go back, I want to go back. I thought I would die of homesickness. The graves started showing up along the way almost immediately. I could see the women squinting their eyes, trying to read anything written on the rough stone or wooden markers. Were they children? Were they men? How did they die? How could their families leave them on the road like this? No one spoke the questions out loud. When we joined up with the big wagon train, I saw other children closer to my own age, but there were so many people and so much to do just to try to get in our 10 miles a day that there was no time for socializing. After only a few weeks with the big train, some folks near the front had a cholera outbreak, and our group decided to split off again since we'd done fine on our own in the beginning. Besides, we'd make better time. It probably didn't matter one way or the other. My father may have died anyway. He got sick. Maybe something he ate, I don't know. He was weak as a kitten, and then he seemed like he was getting better. And then he just died. He had been teasing me the night before, trying to coax me out of my melancholy. He told me in California there were 100 men for every woman, and I'd be able to marry the governor if that's what I wanted. My mother wouldn't come to his grave. She seemed more angry than sad, something I couldn't fathom at the time. James put an arm around her shoulder, but I saw her brush it off. I thought to comfort her myself, and then thought better of it. I even thought to comfort James, but he kept his distance from me. Frankie seemed to take his solace in nature and walked apart from us, finding his own way in the brush. Thank God Willie let me hold him. He was starved for it, in fact, since my mother's attention was fixed on her Bible. It was then that I separated from her completely in my mind. If she would not look at my father's grave, then my gaze would hold it long enough for the both of us. I held Willie and sat by my father's grave until the light started to fade.
Well, there's gold in California, in the mountains, by the sea. So my daddy, he hit the trail west with my mama, my brothers and me. It took 10 days to reach the Grand River, counting the graves on the road of those dead from the fever. And I long for St. Louis in my heart. A gentleman passed us in Kansas, he's going back the other way. Colorado had beaten his heart out, all that mattered was taken away. In the snow that lies deep on the mountain, he buried his wife and their new baby daughter together. Oh, I long for St. Louis in my heart. A soldier joined us in Wheeler. He had been shot, but many had died. He wept as he talked of the battle, said as they killed, the Indians cried. Now fear is our new way of living, and as I pray every night St. Louis in my heart. So there's gold in California, many seek, but few shall find. My daddy passed on in Nevada. We never looked back when we left him behind. Still the men count on the gold, while all their mothers and wives count the graves on the road. And I long for St. Louis in my heart. Oh, I long for St. Louis. Oh, I long for St. Louis. Oh, I long for St. Louis. Oh, I long for St. Louis.
My mother quickly figured out that men on their way to and from the mines had need of many basic necessities like serviceable pants and shirts and most of all, socks. We moved into a cabin near Angel's Camp, and she and the boys would go into town to supply those things that we had spent hours in the making. James was determined to make something of himself and went to work at the land office. That left me to mind the cabin. It was small and simple, and much of our food could be brought in from town, so I was alone with not all that much to do. With James' help, I managed to learn how to read, but I was restless and bored and lonely. We had a water well less than a quarter of a mile from the cabin, and Mother was trying to save enough money to get a pump and a slough, but for now I had to wheel jugs up to the house. That's how I met Daniel. He offered to help push my wheelbarrow. Some boys were on their way to the mines, and some were on their way back. You could tell from a distance which way it was, and I don't mean by the direction they were traveling. I mean the way they walked, carried themselves. One way filled with purpose and kind of quick, and the other slow and stooped and dragging. One thing they all had a need for, though, was comfort. They needed me. They said they loved me, and I know that they did. Most of them probably still do if they ever think of me. They saved me as well. Without them, I would have gone mad, I'm sure of it. Daniel was the first, and he nearly made me forget about Jacob. It was Daniel that explained to me about babies and where they come from. He camped near our cabin for almost 3 weeks. I could hardly bear it when he said he had to go to the mines, that there were men there waiting for him. He promised to come back in a couple of weeks, and I know he meant it when he said it. 2 weeks turned into a very long time.
Daniel Boyd is the love of my life. He captured my heart on the way to the mines. I'm a woman now since I turned 15. So it's right when he goes that I give what he needs. And when his fortune's made, he'll marry me. We'll have a farm, raise a family. his hope in his pack, saying Daniel would be here if he's coming back. If he knew I was waiting, what could stop him, he said. And the mines can be hard, he might even be dead. And I see Andy's kind, so I give what he needs. When his fortune's made, he'll marry me. But he doesn't return. And what could it be? Either fortunes are few, or they don't want me. It's the mind's turn a man, as the next traveler said. But his warm thoughts of me, he's the hard road ahead. And he tells me his life, and he has to succeed. And I see that he's scared, so I give what he needs. Varied in heart, but alike in their need. They tether their fear to my womanly way, and promise sincerely this debt to repay. And the thoughts of this night are a tie that might bind our hope for each other, payment in kind.
After that, I found that if I concentrated on comforting the boys who came by, I could keep my mind off my own troubles. It seemed like the right thing to do. I supposed I knew all along that my family would find out somehow. I wasn't ignorant. I also knew they would not see it as right. And James was in a saloon and heard someone talking about me. I forgave James, though. His punishment of me was over in minutes, whereas I'm certain he suffered for my transgressions for the rest of his life. He took full responsibility for my sins like a true brother, though he hated me for it. My mother turned her back to me, at last achieving completely the solid, unyielding state she had long been approaching. I heard her tell Frankie I would burn in hell, and that he was never to touch me or speak to me again. So be it. I left for San Francisco.
Stayed above ground, or if this old cabin was closer to town, or the boredom and loneliness, both names of hell, had ignored all the boys when they drank from the well. Now my mama, she mourns for my eternal soul, says one dip in the river would make my life whole. But she doesn't know how much is at stake. There's more sin in me than one river can take. And it's shameless couple doors swing open to heaven inside, filled with angels who sing as they fall through the night. Every night I lay down with the devil and burn, then find my way back with the money I earn. And if one can be mean, there are 20 who cry when they're grieving for home, or they're sick for their wife. Am I blameless? Who can say? Shouted so loud and so long, they call my life ruin, but the Bible is wrong. A man's heart breaks open, and what flows inside of this Magdalene life can give hope to what's died.
For any who have never been inside a saloon, I can only describe the environment there as familial. All that I had imagined was lacking in my true family was filled to overflowing in my early days at the Blue Wing. The other girls, my sisters as I thought of them, each had their own reason for taking money for love, but I do believe I was the only one who would have been happy to live that way for free. Except that I did need the money. The miners were generous, as were the businessmen from town. Someday, on my return to St. Louis, they would see a very different girl from the one who had left. It was my fantasy that I would make my way back to that city adorned in jewelry and beautiful clothes, and that whatever situation had found Jacob, he would not be able to stop himself from sacrificing all and coming to me. I don't know what was to happen next. The fantasy ended once Jacob swept me into his arms. But in the meantime, I could be riotously gay, riotously, hysterically gay. When you're a young woman, nothing can compare with the feeling of being wanted by men. All girls live with it, and a few, like me, dive headlong into it. We swam in pools of human desires fulfilled. We laughed and danced and drank and laughed some more. I'll tell truthfully, I did not think it wrong at the time. I don't think it wrong now. Maybe the fires of hell await me for that thinking. Well, I can't help that. One day, as I was dressing up the card table, A roughneck came into the Blue Wing and headed in my direction. He looked familiar, but it was several moments before I recognized Frankie, now 14. He had come to tell me that Mother had died and was laid up in a funeral home in Placerville. He thought I would want to see her. James did not know that he had come to get me. I was shocked to learn they knew where I was. At that moment, I did not want to see her, but Frankie had risked something and come a long way. I left with him that same afternoon and later was glad I did. Laying there, her Bible in one hand as always, for once her expression was not grim. I remembered her lap when I was a little girl, and the time I saw her smile up at my father as she rocked Frankie when he was a newborn. I wondered then how much of her there was in me, and I kissed her cheek when I left.
When I kneel beside my bed tonight, I will ask the Lord to hold you tight. You're taken in, no more to say. You have found your final rest today. As I sit beside your silent breast, behold the face that loved me best. Oh, Mama, do you leave me now to make my way alone somehow? And the river of years filled an ocean of tears. There's relief when a hard life goes by. Though our lives parted ways till the end of my days, oh, your heart I will carry inside. At last I think I understand that proud book that rests beneath your hand. Split our lives apart with pain and strife, but leaves hope for us in afterlife. The river of years filled an ocean of tears. There's relief when a hard life goes by. Though our lives parted ways till the end of my days, oh, your heart I will carry inside. Oh, your heart I will carry inside.
During this time in my life, I had a chance on several occasions to witness the comings and goings of Joaquin Murrieta and his gang. It amused me in later years that there were so many who doubted that Joaquin actually existed, thinking the tales too tall and too numerous. But I can tell you, I saw him myself with his beautiful woman, Rosita. He was dashingly handsome. Murrieta was badly used by the white men, beaten, bound, and lashed, then driven from his rightful claim at the mines. His brother was hung as a horse thief, something he did not do. I know that Rosita was raped. It was said as Joaquin was forced to watch. He then declared his life would be lived for revenge, his path marked by blood. He and his gangs would rustle, rob, murder, and maim across all of California for many years. The California legislature hired a transplanted Texan, Harry Love, to lead a band of 20 rangers to find and kill Joaquin Murrieta and his bloodthirsty minions. They would be paid for 90 days and, should they succeed, were to receive an additional $1,000 as a reward. The governor himself then offered an additional $5,000 from his own funds as further incentive. Well, it was hardly surprising, therefore, that shortly before the 90 days ran out, Captain Love and his men delivered the decapitated head of a man they claimed to be Joaquin, along with the severed, disfigured hand of Manuel Garcia, one of Murrieta's gang, known widely as Three-Fingered Jack because of a missing ring finger blown off by a bullet. Love and his rangers collected their pay and all the reward money. Murrieta killed hundreds of men, maybe thousands, I don't know, but he was always courteous when he was at the Blue Wing. I don't believe they ever caught him. That could have been anyone's head that Captain Love cashed in on, though it was undoubtedly Three-Fingered Jack's hand in the jar.
He's the picture of private desire. You can't believe your eyes. Oh, would he look your way? And he stands with the dark-eyed Rosita waiting at his side. A face like Judgment Day. Now the man at the bar watches eyes, yearning for the call. The desperado game. In an instant they'd offer their lives, though it could end it all. They'll never be the same. The thief Joaquin, seen in places he's never been. If the deed is done and the law's on the run, you'll know that it's him. His promise made long ago to take back Mexico waits only for the new year to begin. His brother who did no one harm, hanging in the street. Now all will share the blame, with the desperate and ravaged Rosita weeping at his feet. He jumped into the flame. Captain Love is the hero today, with his awful prize. A head and hand, they say. But Murrieta and his proud army may yet arise to fight another day. The thief Joaquin, seen in places
There came a day when I knew I had enough money to return to St. Louis in the manner I had dreamed. I could probably have bought a city block there with the money I had now. And I longed for Jacob, as silly as that seems. It was more probably my youth I longed for, and for the more normal life I had been denied. But whatever the hidden reasons, the surface fact was that I wanted Jacob, and I wanted to go home. But when I actually formed the words in my mind, going home, I was stopped for a moment in my tracks. I looked out on San Francisco Bay, teeming with frayed lives and adventures, and tried to imagine my homecoming. Not as I had fantasized, but as it truly must be. Who would greet my arrival? Kathryn? Well, surely she had a husband by now and children. Jacob? I had no idea what his life had turned out like. Indeed, if he was alive at all. And how would they find me? I was, after all, a woman of easy virtue. Would fine clothing and jewelry hide that truth? And even if it did, what was I to do then? Quilt? Farm? Marry? I turned away from the bay, back toward the saloon. I couldn't imagine what life could be like without my family at the Blue Wing. I also did not know any horrors of advanced age. What would become of me if I stayed? I resolved to close my eyes and tell the truth. That's all. Just tell the truth of what felt right and good. I opened my eyes and walked back into town.
From here on the hill, the ships seem still, and the ones gone today turn their eyes away from the land where I stand. The hour is at hand. All I've known is to long for home, and the things I've done, why they were begun. At last I can be a sail on the sea, growing wild and free. And the ships in the bay, let them sail